Oh, there we go. So the audio was turned off. Sorry. We were doing some troubleshooting. That's why with Jeff's Wirecast, and we didn't want to drive you guys bananas. So the audio was turned off. Sorry. So Jeff updated his Mac OS, and the security and privacy settings were screwed up, I guess, so far.
Yeah,
So
but
after the show, we're gonna kind of go through it.
we'll swap out the background here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I have a macro that I have set up so I can just press a button to turn the audio on and off, a master global button. Makes it easier for me. Excuse me, if I have to. And usually in pre-show, just to prevent any kind of loud, obnoxious sounds that come through sometimes when you're booting up computers and things like that. I usually keep it muted, and then I wasn't looking at my audio meter like right in front of me, so I didn't realize that the audio was off. So I apologize. I'm a little under the weather, so you guys didn't hear that, but I said it before. So um, hopefully, hopefully I can get through this without my voice going because I got a show to do tomorrow night too. Um, and tomorrow night's show's even longer. It's usually like an hour, and then it's half hour, 45-minute post show. Those guys get crazy on the gaming show.
It's just you're just blowing the doors off of that too. I mean, that's the cool thing about it.
It's fun. It's fun, but we're getting a lot of good guests. Like last week, um, was it last week? Yeah, it was last week. We had the one guy that wrote that song "Pac-Man Fever" back in the what was it, the 70s, early 80s.
Been a couple years, yeah.
Jerry, I can't think of his last name off the top of my head, but um, real nice guy. He came on the show and he was talking about Pac-Man Fever. So we've been getting some pretty high profile guests to come on and share the love of retro games. So
No, that's cool. Is he going to be maybe doing a reprise of that with Minecraft Fever or anything along those
yeah.
lines?
Well, I know his partner had passed away. I think it was like 10 years ago, the one that
Wow.
originally did the song. Um, so I don't know. He's like late 60s, early 70s. I don't know if he's even doing his music
Oh wow.
anymore. So, um, but yeah, no, real nice guy. So, and we had a lot of fun. But NAB's coming up rather quickly.
Yeah, it is.
That's kind of what
It
prompted.
is.
That's kind of what prompted the topic today, because people out there watching, and we'll kind of get into this about help further your brand. And these are things today we're going to talk about how you can further your brand. We're coming off of Content 101 last week. Sean had some great insight. If you missed that show, go back and watch it. I think you guys will get a lot of cool information out of it. But we're going to kind of piggyback a little bit on that, especially with NAB coming. Um, there's some good advice here that Jeff and I can give you based on some of the things that we've done to kind of further your brand. So, and Marty's coming back from New York, so he should be back with us next week. But it looks like probably once a month he's going to miss because he has these outings he has to do. So,
Well,
hey, Brad.
I think it's high time we finally did the Marty World Tour T-shirt. And every time he goes away, we have the graphic come back with a big wherever he just was. You know, it's like
Yeah,
the dates just go down the line, and
that'd be pretty
that'd
cool.
be awesome. Yeah, we miss Marty, and it's kind of funny. It's like it's rare now that sometimes when three of us are actually on at the same time. There's just everybody's got a brand and business and things like that, and trying to make it all work. But it's always good to get together and get everybody back.
Yeah, LinkedIn was saying that the audio is off too. It's on now. Um, yeah, I know. We actually had some people that were saying to us about like doing the show because we do it in the middle of the afternoon, but it is part of the workday for us. This is something that I do for my job, and these guys have been gracious to join me as well to do this. So it is in the middle of a workday, and I realize people can't always pull away, but there's a lot of people that go back and watch this after the fact. So it's definitely something. I
Yeah,
mean, a, a huge jump in numbers.
yeah. I mean, one of the things I'm curious about is like if there was an alternate time
Yeah.
for, or I don't want to say replay because you can watch it anytime these days, but if there was an alternate time when you would like to see it, or maybe, let's just blue sky and say maybe there's kind of a secondary version, or maybe kind of an unplugged, or whatever you call it, the after party.
Yeah.
When would people really find that? Because that in of itself is a whole conversation on social media for your content, is when do you post? When do you put something out on live? And the dynamic is, if you haven't thought about it, like on LinkedIn, a lot of the better live shows are actually happening in the afternoons because you've got the West Coast you've got to,
Right.
you've got to be concerned about.
That's why I did this
So
at 2 o'clock so we could get the West Coast involved. If you do it too late,
that's right.
you know.
Yeah, it makes it interesting to try to figure it out. It's like all of a sudden everybody went from being TV viewers to now you're the CBS executive producer of program, and you're like, how do I do this? Because and this is how it works. Even in TV today, 8 o'clock prime time. Unless the show's live, it airs, and then they go down the line from Eastern, Mountain, Central to Pacific time, and it kind of plays in those affiliates all the way down the line. Um, but that's why on Sundays in San Francisco, football starts at 10 o'clock in the morning because the one
Yep.
p.m. games kick off, and so
Well, and
it's nice to have.
that's the other thing somebody mentioned about the UK time. That's the other reason I do it in the afternoon because it makes it for the UK people that they can still tune in. So it's hard to find that. Somebody in the chat room said, "Are you guys using embedded audio?" I'm not exactly sure I understand the question because that could go so many different ways, but I'll give you a little rundown real quick because then we got to start the show. I'm using an audio mixer. So Jeff's coming in on a program that's like Skype called NeuralNet. That's going into the mixer. My microphone and all the other mics in the studio and the other inputs are going into the mixer. The mixer is then sending an audio signal XLR left and right out into the Wirecast Gearbox XLR input left and right, and then we're mashing that together with the video. Now, there's some other equipment that I send the signal to that I will use embedded audio over SDI, um, especially external recorders and things like that. But for the most part, it's coming right off the mixer, and sometimes you have to set an audio delay. But for the most part, I think we've got it pretty dialed in. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, there's so many variables that go into line with that, Steve. Especially with WebRTC, which is the protocol that all of the platforms are using. Um, it's not exactly the most intelligent thing out there. It's more open source, and getting things to line up can be a little tricky. But by and large, it's been amazing. I think across the board that so much of it has worked the way we would hope it
yeah,
would. But every now and then you get a little bit of a delay because remember the internet doesn't send out a package like Amazon in one big box and it shows up where it's supposed to. It's literally millions of little bits and bytes that go through many different places, some through other countries and things. It comes back and gets recompiled, and you hope it lines up at the exact millisecond you want it to. So it's actually kind of a phenomenal thing when it does work.
yep. All right, guys, we're gonna get this started, but what we want to do eventually is do a just a whole show of just Q&A. So if that's something you guys are interested in, put it in the chat room. We'd love to see it because that's something we'd like to do for you guys if that's something you want to do. So we'll be right back, and I'll promise there'll be audio in a few minutes. Hey guys, welcome to another edition of On Social, the show that talks about everything that has to do with live video, social media, marketing, the whole nine yards. My name is Stephen Haywood, and I apologize ahead of time. I'm a little bit under the weather, but you know what? The show must go on, and I am joined by the two-time, I can say this now, the two-time Emmy Award winner, Jeff Fitzgerald. Welcome, sir.
You made me sound like Jerry Cooney there walking out into the boxing ring.
Well,
I
you were nominated four times and you won two out of the four. So I'd say you scored pretty good.
Oh, I'm very, very thankful for it. I think it's amazing. We won for best community PSA campaign and for the cinematography, the photographers, what they call it in the broadcast world. And those are two really cool things. And what do you do with that? And I've got a special thought here because I didn't make the trip to Nashville. So once the statuettes are accounted for with the accounting company, they go back to the academy. They're supposed to obviously be sending me some statuettes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbox one of them on the show. I think it'd
Oh,
be kind of cool to do because I
yeah, that'll be
I've never
fun.
received them before. So,
No,
but
that'll
no,
be
it's
real
really
cool.
cool.
That'll be awesome. That'll be awesome. And then it shows people a little bit about what's possible. If you keep going what you're doing in video and video production, the opportunities that are out there, right?
Actually, I really think that's appropriate because, I started 35 years ago. I've only entered the Emmy competition one other time. It was 10 years ago. I did an ad, and it was actually an online ad, and that was the first year they opened it to web programming and things. And I thought, oh, maybe this has a shot. But the thing about the Emmy Awards that I've always respected is it's not the kind of award like a lot of the industry awards where you feel like you can buy them. You put enough entries in, somebody's going to give you one. Some categories will have two competitors. Some of them will have seven. The way they work it is that if they think that there's a piece of work that merits the consideration for an award, it goes into that nomination committee. And so, really, if you're nominated, that's a really good mark that you've done something people see some value in. And so, I think not whether it's an Emmy award or anything you want to go for, stay on it because I think it's well worth the journey. So
Well, congratulations again, and I think it's pretty awesome because it solidifies everything that we're trying to do here. And one the topic that we've got today is help to further your brand.
that's right.
And one of the things that kind of brought this on, and we've got a bunch of other topics that we're going to go over the next couple of weeks. But one thing that brought this on and stirred this up, Jeff, was we have NAB coming up. And for those that don't know what that is, it's the National Association of Broadcasters. This is where every broadcasting company, Telestream included, and or broadcaster attends. This is something that, and I know there's a cost involved, but this is something that if you're a broadcaster, this is the Super Bowl of broadcasting shows, if you will. This is something that you want to make it a point to attend if you can, if you financially can, because not only are companies bringing out new products, but it's a great way to meet and greet some of the companies, and maybe you've kind of gone back and forth with them via email. Maybe you've seen them on social media. It's a way that they can put a face to the brand. And in my opinion, and I've done this in the outdoors and I'm doing this with the gaming, it helps solidify you as a legitimate um, company or a legitimate brand, let's say. Because I've talked to different companies and they go, "Are you a legitimate brand or are you a Facebook brand?" And what they mean by that, Jeff, is they'll say, "Well, do you have a website?" "No, I don't have a website." "Do you have a YouTube channel?" "No, I don't have that." "But I have a Facebook page and I've got like 10,000 likes." And the company goes, "Yeah, well, if Facebook goes tomorrow, so do you." So, um, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit. Do you think
Sure.
also like, that's my opinion. I think that no matter what you're in, and we're in the broadcast industry, and we're also in some other industries. I think it's a point that you need to make to go to at least this one time, just so people can get to see who you are.
Oh, I think for multiple reasons, NAB is a great destination. It started out obviously being very I don't want to call it geek and engineering, but that's kind of what it is in a lot of ways. But what it was a lot more so years ago, you go to look at the new cameras, the new lenses, the new lights, and all these different things. And as social has opened up the door for everyday people to have a personal brand, a personal identity, a personal celebrity, there is a new opportunity to get in front of people that recognize you and say, "Hey, you know what? I like what you're really doing. I think what you've got there is maybe something special. We'd like to partner with that. Maybe there's something we can do to help forward you along in your dream, and maybe we can add some value and find some recognition for what we're trying to do." And I think that, networking is, the saying on LinkedIn. One of my good friends, Rob House, and a number of others say, your net worth is your network. And if you're truly interested in moving your brand forward, and I'm not saying in terms of just finding followers and things like that, if you really want to
Yep.
move things in the right direction, that's going to come from meeting people. And when you meet people, those opportunities are going to flourish. They're going to know other people, and that's how things are going to get done. So
No, I agree, and I think that if you're out there in whatever industry that you're getting involved in, whether it is broadcasting or if it's outdoors or whatever it is, you need to make it a point to go to some of these trade shows, and not just the local ones. I mean, I do local ones as well, different. Um, Jeff, there's like pod camps and things like that that you can do that are local. There's local meetups and things like that. That's great for building local community, and I encourage people to do that. But I also think that you need to get out there where these companies are at and let them know and let them see what you're capable of doing and what your talents are. Just like you, if you would have never applied for to put your content out there to become an Emmy a winner, you would have never known if you could have won.
yeah,
You have to,
I
you have to
mean,
put
yeah,
it
that
out
makes
there.
a lot of you do have to put it out there. And I would say if you're really thinking about going to, especially if you're going to go to a major conference, whether it's, NRB is next week, Podfest is the first week of March, there's NAB, there's a number of really great conferences throughout the year. Vid Summit's another great one. Um, you want to be strategic about it at the get go. And that means you want to have a plan in place weeks before you really think about going, because you want to start making contact with people. Hey, you guys maybe have a piece of equipment that I would like to have on my show, and I would like to meet you. Are you guys going to be at NAB? Are you going to be at this particular conference? And you begin working those relationships digitally, so that the time comes when you get in front of people, you've removed kind of the awkward factor when five other people are standing around. You can say, "Hey, I'm Steve, and I do No Boundaries Outdoors," and the guy's like, "I know exactly who you are."
Yep.
I'll give you an example, and I just thought of this. It's not exactly appropriate, but I think it makes the point. In 2007, I had applied for a job with the Atlanta Falcons to do game day production. And a lot of times, especially back in the when I was more interested in doing more of that kind of stuff, I would do something fairly creative. So I put on a quarterback jersey from Atlanta, and I built an ESPN little virtual set, built a little video about it. It was like 1 or 2 minutes about me, and I made it look like I was their new MVP or something. And so they flew me down for an interview, and I walked into Flowery Branch, Georgia, where their training facility is. Come up to the counter, and the lady at the counter, who looked like typical John Hughes movie, completely bored out of her mind, not paying attention. She walks up. When I walk up, she says, "Hi, Jeff. Here's your badge. Everybody's happy here to see you." And I was really kind of floored by that, because I'm like, how do you even know who I am? And she says, "Everybody in the building was sent that video." And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And what it was is somebody um, outside of their organization was showing how much they really appreciated who they were and what they were all about. And so I think there's a lot of value in making a connection, and for the right reasons, not because you're trying to get gain and things
Right.
like that. The value always comes from great relationships anyway. But when you let people really know you value who they are and what they're all about, I think that's going to grow your network just organically and natively. So weeks out from NAB, be looking at the people you want to meet, whether it's other peers in the industry, whether it's people that you want to get together for some fun after work, and just together and talk shop, those kind of things. And always be putting out content that makes that message clear of who you are, what you're all about, what value you bring in your industry, or the message that you've got. And then don't be afraid to get out and shake hands, because that's always the scary part. A lot of people who make content, I'm one included, people a lot of times don't believe it, but I'm what's called an introverted extrovert. I always get a little nervous being even on live here in my own house. But at the same time, you got to do it. You got to get out in front of people. You got to be willing to shake some hands and just say hi, and just be yourself. And when you do that, good things are definitely going to come.
No, absolutely. And I like what you said about going in with a plan. A lot of people go to these trade shows, and some of them are big. And we're using NAB as an example because it's huge. It's one of the biggest trade shows. CES is another one if you're into consumer electronics. That's another big one. But those halls are as big as blocks, like actual blocks.
Yeah.
So there's three halls out there for NAB, and like I said, they're huge, and they're some of them are 2 floor, and a lot of times when you go out there and like Jeff said, you want to go to your favorite companies and you want to, let them know who you are and that maybe you did a piece on them and, um, one of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of times is, like Jeff said, people don't go in with a plan, but what they'll do is right before the show, they send out emails and they'll say, "Hey, schedule a time," and everybody wants to schedule a time, you know, for every company, and that's not always practical because if you don't know the lay of the land, Jeff, you could be in South Hall and have to run to North Hall, and you have, without anybody there, it might be a half-hour walk. With
Yeah, well,
people
that's the
there, it's
thing.
45
Nobody
minutes, right?
Yes, nobody knows how big we're talking here. NAB is like literally New York City blocks big in turn. It's the only conference of the year I think that most housewives, and I use that, I don't mean housewives in the old sense, but most spouses would say, no, you're not going because they know that their better half is going to come back wanting to spend $90,000 on whatever they've seen because it's literally blocks and cubes and booths and just miles of great technology and great things that you can get into. And so it is definitely worth going to, but it's a beast in a lot of ways. But, NAB is not the only thing that you can think about in terms of being able to further your brand. The whole vibe that you're putting out in terms of, what your message is. We talked about this just, I think a couple weeks ago. What your value offering is to other people. You can further your brand in the terrestrial sense too, even in your local community, because if you haven't heard about meetup.com, it's the number one um, website, app, whatever you want to call it, for getting into groups of other people that have these really crazy, they could be, Minecraft clubs, or it could be the Steve's video game club, that kind of thing. And you can get in front of other people, get in front of networking groups, get in front of people that are speaking your language. And you can use the digital now. When you do that and you go into a group in your local community and they go, oh my gosh, this guy's actually doing live streaming or he's doing video and
Hmm.
he's creating great content. Now you're a little bit of a celebrity to them, and you're now on their radar, and they're definitely not going to forget that. And obviously, we saw it at the Super Bowl. Facebook groups are growing just crazy huge. Starting your own Facebook group is a great way of getting your brand out there, being able to put content out there that people will value, and in collaboration. So we can talk through these different items as we go, but I think the biggest thing when you really think about it strategically is you have to really look at where the people are. They don't always want to come to you. You've got to go to them many times.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, and I think that's where local comes into play, right? Get involved locally, whether it's I've been looking at my daughter's middle school to get involved to teach them broadcasting. I mean, they have a teacher there, but
That's
their
awesome.
tech level is very low, so they have old cameras that are maybe from the 80s and SD cameras. So I mean, it's really irrelevant in today's broadcasting age. So but that in turn is going to help my brand. They're going to get to know that this is the go-to guy in the area for broadcasting, and it's more or less, my daughter enjoys it. Her friends enjoyed it when they were over the house here, and I told the story before, and they were doing their own mock broadcast. So there's definitely interest there. So those are some of
Oh,
the things that you can do to get
yeah.
involved.
No, there's no doubt about it. I was gonna. You brought back another memory. My daughter, when she was in sixth grade, wanted to. There was some other, I think, some other kid that was a little bit more rambunctious, and she wanted to impress everyone in front of these class projects. And so we did a video on the history of Tennessee. And at one point, I put her on the green screen and made her look like a weather girl. And so she was at a news desk for this little 1 minute video, and she said some things about the history of Tennessee. And she goes, "Now to Gabby with the weather," and it was her, obviously in a different outfit, wearing a cowboy hat, pointing to the map and some things. And then she's like, "Back to you," and then it was back to the news desk. And apparently, all the kids that watched the video thought that that she had a sister that was an identical twin and all this. And the great thing about that is it opened up a conversation about all the cool things you can do with video. Yeah, you could, if you wanted to be two people and you wanted to do a video, if you wanted to use a green screen to do something uber creative, you could do that kind of thing. And so the whole takeaway here is not just whether you're in the local school, whether you're in the local business community or in the local networking. I think the overarching message and the bigger takeaway of value is that you've got to get in front of people that have the need that you want, the problem that you want to solve, and the need that you can fill for them, because that's where they're going to connect you being on the landscape of everybody else to, well, this guy we know can help. And when that happens, that's when I think you really make that deeper connection with someone. And all of a sudden you get an email 2 days later going, "Hey, we'd like to have some coffee," or Can you schedule a phone or video call with us? I think that's where things really start to take off.
Yeah, and when I want to talk a little bit about the Wirecast gear. Now, you guys know a few weeks ago, I had been working on restructuring the studio, getting everything situated and in here. And one of the things is the brand new Wirecast Gear 2. This is the brand new Wirecast gear, and there's a bunch of different flavors with this. Now, I have in the studio here the 420, which gives you the most versatility when it comes to broadcasting, especially if you want to go at that pro level. Now it does cost about $9,000, but it does give you the ability. Like right now, I'm powering 7 monitors, and I still have the ability to power another monitor or two off of this unit, and I'm streaming and recording 720p streaming and 1080p recording, and I'm sitting about, Jeff, 35% CPU. And
Which is amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's totally cool. And you can go to telestream.net/on social, because the folks at Telestream are gracious enough to allow us to do the show. And one of the ways, um, we can do that is to help pay the bills, is to check out the products, because we use the products. It's not just something that we talk about here just to talk about. Um, the production value has increased due to these great products. And Jeff, I mean, compared to some other hardware that's out in the market, and I've been comparing the Wirecast gear, the new Wirecast gear Unit 2, and as I've alluded to you, um, I'm very impressed with it, and I think that it's definitely something that people need to reevaluate. If you looked at Gear, the first iteration, you really need to check out Gear 2, because I think you'd be surprised
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
enhancements.
There's no doubt. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, I just said you'd be surprised at a lot of the enhancements.
Yeah. No, and I apologize. There's a little bit of a delay in the audio in my ear. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the difference from Gear version 1 to Gear version 2, you've got Xeon processors. And again, this machine is not necessarily the cell for everybody. There's a big investment, but even beyond that, you've got to be in a place in your journey where you're ready to use something like that. It's in some ways maybe on a higher level, like a better grand piano and those kind of things. And so, where do you start when you're not really at that level, but you still want to really get good and do live streaming? You start with Wirecast 1, get yourself with one camera. You have the ability to play media into it. You have the ability to really do something really cool. You need Wirecast Studio, Wirecast Pro. There's steps up from that. If you've got your own hardware and you've got a pretty decent machine, they work wonderful. And so, the gear is as I said, I think last time we talked about this, it gives you the peace of mind in a moment of production, especially outside the studio when you're on the road and you have to know mission critical is supposed to work, it'll work. And that's where that peace of mind comes from. And that's why I think this is really going to be a really big success for Telestream, because it is a whole remake of what the gear product looked like from before.
Oh, absolutely. And I think people will be really, really satisfied with it. Something else that I think, Jeff, we can talk about with your brand and furthering your brand. A lot of times people can actually do damage to their brand, whether they realize it or not. And I kind of want to talk about an experience where I've seen it on this show. I've kind of seen it recently on this show. People like to come in and trash a company just because they didn't get the response that they wanted or needed, or think it wasn't as quick as they wanted it to. And when people start looking at their profile and they find out what type of person that they are, they go, wow, I don't know if I want to do business with XYZ company because this is the way they're acting. You can do your brand really damage if you're like one of those people. I mean, I do a lot of reviews for companies, and I will make sure before I do any kind of review of the product that if it's something I don't understand, I will not do the video and say, "Oh, this is just garbage, Jeff. This thing doesn't work right." And it could be my own ignorance, right? That I didn't understand how it worked. So I always try to clarify with the company how that product behaves in order to give a honest,
Yeah,
unbiased review. And I think if you're out there trying to review products and you're trying to get in with the company, the worst thing you could do is attack them based off of your own ignorance of understanding the product or products that you're working with. So I want to put that out there because that is
sure.
detrimental too.
It's like it is definitely brand suicide, and it goes both ways. Not only for
Oh,
a
yes.
company that doesn't know how to respond to their customers, but or somebody who thinks they're a something, and they're like, "You all don't know what you're doing. You know, your product is X, Y, and Z." And I mean, and let's be honest, there's a lot of times when products are in a development phase in certain areas. You know, not every product is at 100% in every area, but that's not the way you handle that kind of thing, because everything you say on the internet these days is captured and
Yeah.
archived somewhere. And we're finding more and more people going back years later going, I probably shouldn't have been such an idiot or a fool by the way I was behaving, because those speak to character issues and behavior issues. And I think those things are more valuable and more important to most customer vendor relationships than anything else, because I can find 15 or 20 people who can hold a camera and do something really nice for an event. But if I can't work with them, or if they have an air of arrogance, or there's some sort of a distance between being able to have an honest conversation, you're just putting yourself in a corner. And so I think these days, we see this so much. I think social media has literally elicited the inside voice coming out for everybody. Nobody can have a civil conversation or anything along those lines anymore, and it just goes from 0 to 100 many times. But the success for people, and especially the success for brands, are those that can be pitched maybe an opportunity to just respond with a grenade, but they know how to hold their own, they know how to bite their tongue, and they can really think it through and look at both sides of an issue. And when you can do that in balance, I think that's what makes your response much more gracious, much better. And I think that's going to get you down the road so much farther. Because when we talk about this metaphor of being a road, it is a long road. It's a road of miles and miles and miles. And people who have tempers, people who cannot behave in such a way that would make their brand respectable across the board, somebody's going to find out about it, and it's always going to be damaging.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you'll find out, and Jeff, you know this. I mean, nothing is perfect. Nothing you use is
Mhm.
perfect. And when you're doing this, whether you're using an app on a phone or you're using production equipment, or anything in whatever industry that you're in or your branding is, um, you'll find, and I can speak from experience on this, that most companies, I would say 99% of companies, Jeff, are willing to work with you on an issue that
Most
you've
are.
had, assuming you approach them the right way. They want to get to the bottom. They don't want you dissatisfied. And if you're having that issue, more than likely other people are. So you got to be very careful if you're you want to further your brand. You have to be very careful about how you handle yourself representing your brand to other people on the internet, because people just think they can hide behind a keyboard and a monitor, Jeff, and that the reality is they're branding themselves as something, and then you show up somewhere, now you're face to face with somebody that you were just calling out and saying, it's garbage, and you're asking them for a favor. They're going to remember that, and it's not a good
Yeah,
thing.
and yeah, or your customers are going to remember it too. You may
Yes.
be, if you're saying that toward another company, or you're a company, whatever whatever that relationship looks like, there's definitely an opportunity where that's going to backfire in a number of ways. And and let's be clear here. We're not talking about when you're frustrated and there's something not working in a product. And I've had that happen ongoing a lot. And I know what that feels like. That's a different thing than going from, I'm having this problem again. I need you all to really pay attention to it because I think this is a great feature, but we need it. That there's not a thing wrong in that kind of a conversation. But when it turns from you all are a bunch of fools and you're an idiot and you start trashing, anytime you do that, I think the trash is going to come back on you at some point. It always does. So,
Yeah. Well, even let's just pretty brief on this. You were having some issues with virtual camera right before the show here, and we're going to work on that afterwards. But you weren't quick to point the finger. You're just like, well, this is what's happening, and you and I talked about it, and we have an idea of a setting inside of Mac OS, right? That potentially is the issue. You could have
we
popped
absolutely
off.
we think that could yeah, we think that could very well be the issue. And I've had this problem ongoing in Wirecast with virtual camera for the last couple months on and off, but obviously it all depends on what browser version you're using, because
Yep.
WebRT is a very it's not, like I said, it's not owned by a big major company who's always investing in
Well,
it.
it's
It's a
open
protocol.
source.
Right, and so things can break, but the thing is, I mean, to me personally, virtual camera is probably that, and the chroma key are absolutely, without a doubt, my 2 main go-tos, and the reason why I use Wirecast. I think they're incredible. The chroma key is brilliantly clean, but that virtual camera gives me the ability to use Wirecast with Zoom, give me the ability to use it with, our show when we're going through NeuralNet, which is a great video software for bringing people in as guests. And so I think there's a lot of value there. But when it goes down, of course I feel frustrated. It went down the day before we were doing this, which is why I'm using my studio backdrop. But getting mad and being mean never get you anywhere. And the thing is, we know that this will get resolved. It's a matter of being gracious enough to explain it with clarity and help somebody along. And from a brand perspective, if you turn it around where you're the company, wouldn't that be what you would like to have? Because that gives you your best opportunity to get that problem resolved and everybody's happy. And so I think you're hitting a good subject here, that we're far too quick a lot of times to be critical, but we're never too quick to be gracious and kind and to say something inspirational or positive. And man, if you can flip those things, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb, because a lot of people don't know how to do that. So,
Well, and here's the thing. Here's a story along those lines with my studio setup. It's very elaborate, and I was so certain. I was so Jeff. I ran test after test after test. I was so certain that one of the products were the culprit. So I contacted the company, and I didn't berate them. I didn't do anything. I was just like, hey, tell me if I'm off base here. And I went through my workflow, and they're like, dang, really sounds like Jeff, that could be the problem. So they remoted in, they checked some things out, only to find out that that was not the problem. But here is a company that has nothing to do with this other product is helping me try to find a resolution, because both of us were unsure if that was the problem or
that's
not.
right. Yeah.
Here it turned out to be a capture card and driver issue.
Yep. I think it makes a lot of sense. And
So
and that's where you
yeah.
see the value of the company stepping forward in a moment like that, because that's when you talk about forwarding your brand. When you have the ability to help somebody else with the thing that's holding them back, and even if there's no monetary moment for you, and you're able to do that, you bet they're going to not only remember it, you've now made a transformation with a customer base from a transaction. Transactions are like 7-Eleven. You buy your donuts and coffee and you move on.
Mhm.
Transformation is where someone goes, you know what? I'll never forget that that person actually took an hour of their time or whatever it might be to get me in a better place, because now you've got a brand advocate working for you, which is a little copy of you, a little mini me of you in their particular neighborhood, in their community, in their network, and they're speaking and doing great things on your behalf. And guys, keep in mind, networks are compounded interest, because on LinkedIn, and this number's, I think, of even 2 years ago. I haven't looked at it lately, but I've got, I think, roughly 3,500 connections on LinkedIn. And between all the people I'm connected to, I think the reach, and this is all theoretical, but the reach is something like 20, 25 million people. And it's ridiculous when you think like that, right? And obviously those are really stretches in terms of, can you really hit that many people? Of course, the
Mhm.
algorithms limit things. But what it really speaks to is the ripple that you put in someone's pond is going to be felt long after you think that the water has resettled. And so when you do great things as a brand, when you do great things as a trying to, the work as an influencer or as a subject matter expert, being able to speak to people and encourage them and help them get where they're going, people will remember that, and they're going to come back and they're going to be like, you know what? Yeah, there's 50 other people that can do work similar to what maybe you do, but I like the way you handled yourself, and I like the fact that you cared, because that's a forgotten art in today's world, especially on Facebook. And maybe I'm harping a little bit, but I think that this is really key because a lot of people don't think about it.
No, I think that is a key point. And we've talked to people on here like, hey, if you're struggling with your setup, if it's elaborate and you've tried tech support routes and you've tried to get answers from forums, and I absolutely cannot stand forums. I get lost in there more than I
Yeah, me
get
too.
anything. I'm just being real. Nothing against forums. Hey, there's people out there that love forums. I get that. I am just not one of those people that like forums. But I will say this: send in your video. Send us in a 2 minute to 3 minute video of your setup, what you're
Yeah,
struggling with. We'll look it over. We'll play it on the show here, and if we don't have an answer, we got a lot of great people here in the community that can answer it, or we'll find an answer for you. Send it in. My email is stephen.h@telestream.net. You send it in. I'll show it to the guys here, Marty and Jeff, and we'll look it over and try to figure out what's going on. Or if you just want to brag about your setup, like, hey, check out our
yeah,
broadcasting setup.
absolutely.
Send it
Well,
in. Or join us on the show about it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we've talked about this too, Steve. We do a lot of talking, right? We talk a lot about media. We talk a lot about, work that's been awarded or whatever it might be. We don't do a lot of showing media. We don't do a lot of the how-to part of this, but
Yep.
this is something you and I and Marty have talked about at length, that we want to move our show in a better direction, because whether it's doing social and mobile video, showing you how to edit on a phone, whether it's what formatting works for Instagram or the kind of content that will work on LinkedIn, or if it's traditional broadcast production, whatever it might be. We want to see more of what the community is putting together, more of what you're putting together,
Hmm.
so that we can all have a conversation about it. So if you've got media that you think, hey, I'd like to, put this out there, send us what you've got, because there's an opportunity here for you right now to be part of the conversation. Because this is not the Steve, Jeff, and Marty show. The whole idea that we're doing this is to try to share some things that maybe we've experienced to try to help what you're doing. So if you've got some great media, you've got some video that you think would be really cool to show off maybe your room. It could be from a tech perspective. It may be I'm having trouble trying to figure out how to evoke emotion in my editing. All that kind of stuff we can talk about. And it's really user generated content in a lot of ways. So if you've got material, send it to Steve, because we'd love to have a conversation about it.
I think it would be pretty awesome. One thing I want to do, and maybe we can do this starting today, is I know there was a lot of questions about Wirecast in the chat room. Maybe we'll do a quick 10-minute post show, something we haven't done, and I know we're kind of doing this off the cuff.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, that'd be cool.
so if everybody wants to stick around after it goes dark, I'll end the recording. Now it will be recorded on Facebook, the post show, if you will. We'll stick around for like 10 minutes. We'll answer a few questions about Wirecast or your broadcast setup. If you've got them, put them in the chat room, and we'll answer it. We'll see how it goes. If it's something that's very worth it in the sense, we'll keep doing it. If not, we're gonna, you know, just kind of pass it on. But we really appreciate you guys tuning in. We hope you learned a lot from this. I know we're speaking from experience. Maybe you have tips that we didn't cover that
Yeah.
you think would be awesome. Send them in. Send us an email. Send it in. Say, hey, I really enjoyed this show. I have some other tips that we could do a part two of this. I mean, there's so many different tips, Jeff, that we didn't even, for furthering your brand that we could kind of get into. But I think we hit some of the crucial, as you called it, deal breakers with your brand, um,
Ye
on this
yeah,
episode.
just to recap, networking in the conference sense, in the conference space, is a great thing, but networking locally is where you're gonna find value. Making your content available to more people and getting out in front of them is always gonna make that a better opportunity for you. And then don't do stupid things that are going to hurt your brand and
That's
keep
right.
you from getting where you wanna go. Those are the 2 big takeaways from today's show.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank Jeffrey Fitzgerald. You can check him out at jeffinhighdef.tv. He's our two-time Emmy Award winner. I'm not going to get tired of saying that. You do know that, right?
I was just thinking we need to make sure you drop that. I appreciate it. But, the thing is, honestly, it's now old news, and we're gonna move forward, and I'm going for another one next year,
There
so
you
we'll see what
go.
happens.
Guys, you can also find me. I'm over at, you can find me with Telestream, but you can also find me at the techbuzz.net. That's where my homepage is, my source of everything. I'm pretty much known as the Tech Buzz everywhere. But we really appreciate you guys tuning in, the kind words in the chat room. Um,
Yes.
Jim said really enjoyed this show. He enjoyed the tips that we talked about. So we appreciate that, Jim. And guys that are in the chat room, stick around. We'll do a little post show. But the rest of you, we'll see you next week for On Social. Okay, we should be back.
Awesome.
All right. Now, if you guys got any questions, now's the time. Where we won't do any kind of switching here and camera switching, but we'll look over here at the chat room. If you have any broadcasting, Wirecast questions that maybe we can answer. Now, I do want to preface this. If your Wirecast question involves like, hey, I'm going from here to here to here and connecting this to this, that might be served doing offline with our support team. But if it's something basic or hey, can Wirecast do this, or I would love to do this, with your Wirecast questions, that's totally cool. We'll do our best to answer because sometimes, Jeff, as you can tell, you can't really get into some of that, like this. You need
Yeah,
to be able to
what
talk
what
in
I would
person.
say is what I would say is present your question, and if there is a reason for it being a little bit more complex to give a better answer, we'll find a way to answer it in a different way. But I would say too, if you've not taken a moment to go through, this is really applicable for every piece of software, Photoshop or whatever, but Wirecast, there are things in there you've probably not really taken a really good, honest, sober look at that have some great value. And one of those for me is the transitions, the stingers. I knew they came out a couple versions back, and I didn't really think a lot about it. But maybe I can show people how to make one in an upcoming show because they're really cool. If you build an alpha channel transition, which basically means you're building transparent video, you can make a. In my case, my logo is a star. I made a star come up full frame, and then have the camera lens kind of open up behind it, revealing new video. And you can go into Wirecast and the manage transitions, and it's so simple. You load up your video file, you drag a little marker to right where there's all solid. It's not showing what was before, it's not going to show what was ahead. And you click, that's where I want to make my change underneath the graphic that you've created. And then basically in your transition settings, you pick that menu item. And the next time you want to, do something really cool, you hit the button, all of a sudden this little animated star will pop up. And as it gets full frame, as it goes away, now there's new video behind it.
Yep.
So it's a really cool, really, really sophisticated feature within Wirecast that nobody talks about by and large that I've heard. And so, whether it's challenges and struggles on how to be better at it, I think there's also a lot of value in looking at it in a fresh way, going, I really thought about using NDI. What is NDI? How do I make that work? And we certainly should get John Mahoney on as a guest
Yeah,
to
to
talk
talk about
about some of these
NDI.
things.
Well, I do want to show here, guys. I want to show you guys a quick troubleshooting tip. There was a gentleman in the chat room during the show that talked about he was trying to stream to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. And one of the big
Mm,
issues that people overlook inside of Wirecast is when you go to your output settings, if you go up to output settings, there's different presets that you can choose of destinations that you want to go to. So for the sake of this, um, I'm going to choose Facebook Live, right? So I'm going to click OK. Now, it's going to prompt me. It's going to put everything in here. But what people don't look at is right here, this encoding. They just take it for granted that,
mm,
okay, this is what I should use because that's what Telestream put in there. But if you look at it,
yeah,
it's 720p 30 at 4 meg. That's a problem if I only have a 2 meg upload stream.
that's right. Yeah.
So now in my head, I'm saying I not only want to go to Facebook, but I want to go to YouTube as well. And so then they'll add the preset for YouTube. And what they don't realize is when you're dealing with bandwidth, and Jeff, my rule of thumbs is half of your maximum upload. So if you have 20 megs up,
Right.
half of that is 10 megs. That's your maximum that you have to stream to your destinations. I even like to take 2 meg off of that only because if I'm using conferences like we're doing right now, call-ins. So 8 megs split by 2 would be 4 megs each destination as my max. Most of the time I'll do 2 or 3 for a 720p stream. If you don't check those things when you go to stream and it's dropping or cutting out or buffering, that's your problem. So just a simple thing like that, just overlooking that, Jeff, could be detrimental to your broadcast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's very clearly where I would suspect the problem is. I was reading along as you started talking about it, and I was thinking we needed to go to the encoder, and that's exactly
Yep.
where we ended up. But you're exactly right about that because also those maximums are theoretical,
Correct.
and a maximum. I'm here on fiber, which I've got 980 up and down, but it doesn't sit at 980 every single second, every single millisecond. It is basically when other people are on a connection, especially if you're in a shared environment, that networking can really fluctuate tremendously. And so when things get shut off a lot of times, you can get in and get it going and everything's kind of nice. And then Alice in the apartment above you wants to send her mother a nice cat and bacon video, but she's got it in a movie format, not an H.264. So now it's really gigantic or some crazy thing. And it starts sucking up the bandwidth upstairs in the apartment building. And now your bandwidth is dropped down by 30%. And that's what things start popping off and
Yep.
killing and things like that. They freeze up. So you have to understand some of the networking, some of the bandwidth issues that can be challenges for it. And of course, while Wirecast can do a really, really nice job hitting different destinations, you've got to have a very, very sophisticated, complex machine in terms of memory, processing
Yes.
power. Threads are going to be important, multi-core, these kind of things, because you got to remember, while we're in an era where everybody thinks you can buy an off-the-shelf product and be ABC, the reality is that's not the reality. You
Right.
can't be ABC that way. And people tend to think that way. Well, I should just be able to, hit everything I want to hit. It's not realistic. And you need to learn a little bit more about the real world about video production and these other things. But if you're smart about them, you like you said, you can begin to calculate a little bit, going, okay, if I've got, 20 megs, okay, I can get that down to a certain number that'll work for me. So the takeaway here is if you really want to continue trying YouTube and Facebook, things like that, just do a test, create your own private Facebook group,
Yep.
make you the only one who can see it, stream into them at 1 meg each and see if they stay stable. Do it at 2 megs each, play with a little bit. Let it run for 3 hours if you need to, just to see what the experience looks like. But the more you learn about that, that will help take away some of those things. Now, having said that, if you're a pro and you're an industry vet and you already understand these things and you're having issues, obviously there's more to have a conversation with the support staff about, because those are
Right.
things that need to be brought up.
Well, that's what I was
But
gonna say. There's a part two to this, right? So I have pulled up. You said about in the coder presets. So there's a list here that people don't know or not aware of, and I'm gonna back out so you all can see how to get to that. So inside of my Facebook preset, there's a little gear off to the right hand side. If you click that gear, it'll say View Details. When you come into here, this is just like going to the other like window encoder preset. But in here, it gives you all the information about this particular encoder set. It gives you the width, the height, the frames per second, which is great. But if you notice up here, it says X264 by H264. What that tells me is that's going to use my CPU and not my GPU. So if I click on this, because I'm on an Apple computer, if I come down here, you'll notice that it has at the bottom, it'll say Apple H264 right up here. Apple H264, which means it's going to offload the encoding process to my built-in graphics card, which is then going to lower my CPU. Because Jeff, I mean, if you're going to two destinations, your CPU is going to it's going to go up. Now, some of you out there are saying, well, I don't have an Apple, so how do I take advantage of that on a PC? Well, the great news is we've partnered with NVIDIA and Intel, so you might see something instead of Apple there, it'll say NVENC. Or I'm sorry, it'll say QuickSync, excuse me. And then for NVIDIA, it'll say NVENC, which will enable you to offload it to your NVIDIA GPU or your Intel discrete GPU. So if you see one of those as an option in there, you're going to want to select it to lower your CPU, because if your CPU is going up 65, 70%, even if your bandwidth is good, it could cause you to disconnect to prevent the program from crashing because you're overloading it. And I guarantee you, if you use one of those video presets using it on your GPU, you're going to cut your CPU by almost half. So if you're at
yes.
50, 60 CPU, you're going to drop down to maybe 20, 30 using GPU accelerated encoding.
Yeah, and Miguel, he has a great question that relates to this as well, which is, is an i5 the equivalent to an i7 in so many words? Can you use either one? I always tell people i7 is the baseline for doing any kind of hardcore encoding and video work. One of my good friends, Lee, has a new laptop that's an i5, and it was running Wirecast fairly significantly heavy up in the where it was showing yellow and red and the 60s and things. But you put that on an i7, that will go down, by, half or 2/3. And so it's one of these things where, when you look at everything and you're like, oh, I want to start doing these great things in video, but I don't want to spend more than $500. This is why people spend more than $500 sometimes, because you get the ability to have better reliability, more, not peace of mind as much, but more of a streamlined, efficient process so that things actually work. And it's important to really have a conversation about these kind of things. And Steve, I'm thinking maybe we need to do maybe a special outside of Owen
Yep.
Social about the bandwidth, the networking, the memory, these things that may be really big hangups at some point, because I didn't think that to really think about it all the way through. But yeah, these are things that easily could hang you up if you're not careful.
What would you guys think? Because I don't want to turn this into a Wirecast show, but what do you guys think about if once a month we did a show that is related to one part of Wirecast? Like we spend the time, like we just did, talking about bitrate and encoding, understanding that, helping you understand what keyframing is. Because I think a lot of people, Jeff, that stream racing events, they don't understand what their keyframe should be, and they're getting that jagged car going across.
Right.
Like if they're we'll use NASCAR as an example, right? That's fast-paced action going around. If your keyframe's not right, it's going to look like this going across the screen, even as you're panning. So understanding what keyframing is, why you need to set your keyframe, is that something that you guys would find beneficial, that we could kind of set it up to, like maybe Jeff covers chroma key one day. We go into it, we show it, because you and Marty probably have the cleanest keys that I've seen done in Wirecast. So I'm sure they would love that. But we focus on
Yeah.
one feature rather than jumping all around the interface, and we just hone in on that one feature so that people can grasp that are struggling with it, they can grasp it and understand how to utilize it.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant, and I think, Dennis, by the way, brings up a great point about the graphics card, the power of your graphics card
Hmm.
being very important to that conversation, whether you've got an i5 or an i7.
He's right.
It's the same thing. You can buy the $50 graphics card on Craigslist that somebody had from 5 years ago, and it'll definitely work, or you can get something that you make a little bit more of an investment in, and it'll take you a lot farther in your encoding journey. So, I mean, it's all it's not rocket science in a lot of ways. The
Hmm.
more value that your system has, the more value it's going to bring you. And so that's not always monetary, but it's sometimes related to that. You just got to think it through. But I'd be happy to do Chroma Keying or any of these other things to help.
Because
So
this is where we can really show the expertise, right? Like you talked about showing it in action with video, showing how to
right.
accomplish this stuff. What does Dennis say here? We just streamed a robotics. You're gonna have to read it 'cause it's too far away. I can't see it.
I got it right here. It says on my iPad here. It says we just streamed a robotics competition at 1080p on a Mac Pro 3.1 gigahertz dual core i5, and our CPU usage maxed at 98%.
Mm.
So let me see more here. I think I got to do more here. Okay.
Okay.
98% low of 75% in Wirecast Pro. So my question is when he's talking about a Mac Pro 3.1 gigahertz dual core i5, is that I would assume it's one of the newer ones,
The trash
not one of
cans or
the
the MacBook Pros?
well, that's what I'm wondering if it goes back even farther than that, which would be even more impressive, right? But
Yeah. I
but
personally
it
I wouldn't do 1080 on an i5. I'm just being realistic here. 720 is more realistic on an i5. Just just being honest. I especially to get good quality 1080 at like 4 to 8 meg per second, recordings and things. When you're switching, Jeff, I mean, i5s, you're pushing, like he said, you're going to be up high. Now, if you're just recording, that's one thing. But if you're streaming and recording, whew, that's brutal.
Well, think about it like this in kind of a more real world practical sense. Let's say you've got a side of a building that's a mural, and you tell this wonderful guy or gal, "Hey, you're the artist. I want you to paint this really nice picture, but I want you to do it 30 times or 60 times in 1 second. And by the way, I want it to be 25% bigger in 1080 than it is in 720. And I also want you to be able to do it in a way that's so fast that we can get it squished down and get it out the door through the internet. If you begin thinking about it and things like that, it's like, oh my gosh, you're asking a lot in one
Yep.
moment. And so you have to be able to manage that real estate, navigate those kind of questions, and figure out what's really more important. Is it stability and smoothness of your frame rate at a 720 screen, or is it
Yeah.
better to go 1080, which I'd love 1080 at a
Yeah.
minimum. But do you want to have it and then every 15, 20 seconds it's giving you a little bit of a kick or showing you some sign that it's about to erupt in trouble? But sometimes things work great, sometimes they don't. But these are some of the things that can cause those issues. So
Well, and he said he's running a MacBook Pro 2017, so that kind of, yeah, I
oh,
have
he's
one
doing a MacBook.
myself.
Okay,
So
got it.
that that
Yeah, yeah.
that I have a brand new MacBook Pro here, but it's a 13-inch. Um, I still, because it's a 13-inch, it's a low end i5. I still won't do 1080 on that. I'll do 720.
Yeah.
And again, this machine is just for playing. Now, the i7 that's in the Wirecast Gearbox, oh, it's phenomenal. You can do 1080p. You can record 1080p. My Mac Pro cheese grater. I mean, I have 64 gigs of RAM in it. It's a 8 core with hyper-threading. That will do 1080p, but I wouldn't dare record 1080p if I'm streaming 1080p because it would tank it. So,
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. That's one thing that's a great point, Steve. One thing they really, really keep in mind with software-based production apps, doesn't matter which one it is, if it tells you it can record, if it tells you it can stream, if it tells you it can do great transitions, great effects, it can do lower thirds, it can do alpha channels. Every one of those elements are going to create a level of complexity
mhm,
that in that particular moment when it needs to do it, it's going to have to breathe harder. And so recording and streaming is something that you can do, and many people do it and have no problems. But at the same time, many people do it and have a lot of problems.
right.
I've got a little Black Magic design, $695, $700 little SD hard recorder. It takes HDMI in, SDI, it's all broadcast quality. And that's what I use because that way now I can hit a button on a separate
Yep.
device and go, okay, I know I'm getting a really good, a really good picture, and leave the streaming software to do what it does best, trying to make that picture beautiful and get it out to people that want to see it live in real time. And I think that's where you do the give and take in your strategy, because these little things over time, you get to the point where you may still have a headache every now and then, but you're not having them every day. And it's
Yep.
because you've now begun to leverage that. So,
I actually use a separate copy of Wirecast to do the recording. I don't Most of the time I don't record on the encoding machine unless it's a backup. But if I see things are starting to get weird, I'll stop that recording. Most of the time I don't have that problem because I've got everything kind of fine tuned. But like you, I have an Atomos Ninja as well that's going to record broadcast quality as a separate recording somebody had asked earlier about embedded SDI. That's one of the tools that I use. It doesn't matter what piece of hardware that I'm using. That is like my go-to recorder, just because I'd rather put more emphasis into the production, and the record feature is just a backup for that matter.
um, Alfredo Steve is asking if we've turned into a tech show, which I think is really cool.
No,
Uh,
we're just doing post show. We're gonna actually wrap it up here shortly. But we just kind of wanted to answer. There was a lot of Wirecast questions in there, so we wanted to kind of answer some of them. And
yeah, I got one other. I don't mean to interrupt, but one last thing here. William Slays is
Yeah, I was
asking
just gonna tell
about the
you
name
that.
Black. It's a mini studio. If you go to Blackmagic Design and look for the mini studio, if you click on recorders, you'll see them. It's a small little device, and actually, grab it here and see if I got. I don't know what all I've got plugged in. This is the after show that I would never do during a real show here. So, plug it here. So this is what the device looks like, and it has got SDI on the back. It's got HDMI out, and its recording format is a little SDI, and it takes two of them. So if you run out of one item, if one of them fills up, you can still keep recording. It jumps over and all that good stuff. So I found this extremely valuable when you're on the road doing streaming or something like that. And you want to just have a confidence backup. To me, it's been just a lifesaver for the money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So LinkedIn was saying that basically, Nathan, I just saw it. I had to refresh the page. Nathan suggested the same thing when I talked about X264 versus Apple to H264, which was a great point to bring up. I didn't see it until just now because LinkedIn, you have to kind of refresh the page to get all the
Yeah.
chatter. And then Steve said in there, Kowalski, I think he says tech suggestions are always appreciated. Well, we appreciate it. We hope like this. If you guys like this type of post show, we'll do a 10-minute afterwards where we can answer some of these questions for you guys based on our expertise. We don't know everything, but I do have 12 years with Wirecast, so I think I'm pretty good with that. So any way we can assist, we will. But really appreciate you guys tuning in. And if there's any other questions that we can answer right quick, if not, we're gonna pull the plug. I gotta get back to work.
Yeah, William, it's a HDMI out only, I believe, on the back of this guy. Yeah, it's HDMI out. It takes SDI in, but you can buy a converter just like you do USB to HDMI. You can get one that's a USB to SDI from Blackmagic as well. It's probably, I think, $160.
There you go. And yeah, somebody was saying about overseas 360p because of their bandwidth. That's the other thing you got to take it. You got it. Bandwidth should be the first thing you check. If you take anything away from this post show, bandwidth should be the first thing that you check when you get to a place that you're streaming, or even in your own house. Bandwidth fluctuates. You could have a problem out at the pole. Somebody could hit a telephone pole, and even though your internet's
Yeah.
been good, you know, you don't know. I always try to do a speed test at least 10 to 15 minutes before I do a show, so I kind of know what I'm up against if I need to tweak it. My son could have came home from school and was up playing Minecraft online. I don't know. So those are types of things that you want to take in consideration that people don't normally. And as I don't want to get his name wrong, but as Nathan suggested, even in LinkedIn, and I've covered that, is the second thing you want to check is what encoder you're going to use. Try to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak. Utilize your GPU if you can. That's going to give you the best optimal performance in Wirecast to get, as Jeff said, you start doing stingers, you start doing lower thirds. That's going to tax the CPU. Why not offload some of the encoding to your GPU with recording and streaming. So you can reserve that CPU for your Stinger transitions and other things like that. So I think that's all we got.
I think so. Yeah, we haven't even got into 3D with Cinema 4D where you need, you know, 24 cores and all that stuff. I just try to send it out and hope some machine I got will pick it up and make it work. But yeah.
Post your suggestions. If you want us to do this post show, we'll do a 10-minute post show, and give us some ideas of what you want us to cover in Wirecast. We can use it as a Wirecast forum that kind of help you guys a little bit with Wirecast. Give us the ideas of your struggle points. Send an email. Put it in this comments in the chat room here on Facebook or LinkedIn. Happy to help. Happy to whatever we can do. But really appreciate it, guys. We'll see you next week.